All right, listener name. We're diving into some pretty heavy stuff with this deep dive.
Yeah.
Iran's nuclear ambitions.
It's a...
You know, your stack of briefings and articles tells me you want to go beyond.
Ooh.
Crucial question.
Will they, won't they? And straight into what happens if they do.
Especially given that recent event that piqued your interest.
Right.
The possible underground test on October 5th near Tehran.
Right, like trying to decipher whispers in a hurricane.
Yeah.
It's amazing what we can pick up from open source intelligence.
Right.
But it also shows how much is left to interpretation.
Yeah.
How do we even know what to trust when it comes to something like seismic data?
That's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're relying on bits of data or statements from Iranian officials.
Yeah.
It's like piecing together a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing and the picture on the box faded with time.
Right.
Iran's history with the West doesn't make things any easier.
To put it mildly,
No.
it's not just the recent cyber attacks on their nuclear facilities, right?
We're talking decades of tension, starting with the U.S. backing Saddam Hussein during the Iran-Iraq War.
Right.
Then there was that whole axis of evil label.
Yeah.
Talk about starting off on the wrong foot.
It's no wonder there's so much suspicion baked into the relationship.
Right.
And understanding that historical context is key to grasping why Iran might feel the need for a nuclear deterrent in the first place.
Okay.
But to understand what getting the bomb really means, we need to rewind a bit.
Okay, let's back it up.
Yeah.
Their nuclear program isn't exactly news, so what makes this moment different?
You're right. Their nuclear ambitions go back decades.
Yeah.
But the alarm bells really started blaring when they hit 84% uranium enrichment earlier this year.
Right.
That's essentially knocking on the door of weapons grade.
Wow.
Which is a whole different ballgame.
Hold on, 84%. I need a quick explainer here.
Yeah.
How far off is that from actually making a bomb?
Think of it this way. Enriching uranium is like brewing super strong coffee.
Okay.
Regular coffee is like reactor grade uranium. It's good for energy, but weapons grade.
Yeah.
That's espresso on steroids.
Wow.
Enough to fuel a bomb.
Okay.
And right now, Iran's brewed a seriously strong pot.
And how long until it's ready to drink, so to speak?
U.S. intelligence suggests Iran could produce enough of that weapons-grade material in as little as 12 days.
Wow.
Not months. Listener name, days.
Right.
This isn't a hypothetical threat anymore. It's now.
Okay, that's a lot to process.
Yeah.
So let's say they do cross that line.
Right.
What happens next?
Yeah.
Do they just start making demands?
It's tempting to think they'd go full Bond villain.
Right.
But the reality is far more nuanced.
Yeah.
History shows us there are generally two paths countries take once they go nuclear.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Lay it on me.
You can have the centralized, cautious approach, like India.
Okay.
They see nukes as the ultimate insurance policy, a last resort. Then there's decentralized tactical route.
Like Pakistan.
Okay.
Riskier, more unpredictable.
Right. Pakistan has had some close calls.
Exactly.
If I remember correctly.
And what's interesting is how both models, despite their differences, have historically led to bolder foreign policy. Pakistan became much more assertive with India once they got the bomb.
Right.
And look at North Korea.
Yeah.
Every nuclear test is followed by something more provocative.
Which begs the question, how would a nuclear-armed Iran act on the world stage?
Right.
They've already got that tense history with the West and and Israel, of course. This isn't just theoretical anymore, is it?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And this is where things get even more complicated. We're not just talking about Iran and its adversaries.
Right.
This has ripple effects across the entire region and beyond.
And it's not just about military action, right? I'm remembering that report you shared, the one from Bank of America, where they found over 80% of young
wealthy investors are pouring their money into fine art.
Right.
They're treating it like a security blanket against global instability.
Right. And that should tell us something.
Yeah.
Think about this. Roughly a third of the world's oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz.
Which, if my geography serves me right, is a pretty narrow passageway and one that Iran could easily choke off.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Now imagine the chaos if they did
Right.
oil prices through the roof.
Oh, yeah.
The global economy sent into a tailspin.
So we're talking energy crisis,
Yeah.
a Middle East teetering on the brink.
Yeah.
And suddenly everyone's an art collector.
It's a complex web of potential consequences,
Right.
and we've only just begun to untangle it.
Right.
We haven't even touched on the possibility of a regional arms race, and arms race is a very real concern.
Yeah.
It's like the nuclear equivalent of keeping up with the Joneses, but with infinitely higher stakes. If Iran goes nuclear, it's not far-fetched to imagine countries like Saudi Arabia feeling the pressure to develop their own deterrence.
So everyone's scrambling to get their hands on the deadliest weapons imaginable just to feel safe. That's a terrifying thought.
And it wouldn't necessarily stop there. Think about the other power players in the region. Turkey, Egypt, maybe even the UAE. They'd be forced to reevaluate their own security calculations. We could be looking at a cascade effect with the Middle East becoming a tinderbox of nuclear tensions.
And then there's the whole issue of proxy wars. Which we know is something you wanted to understand better.
Yes, this is a critical point. Iran has a long history of using groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza to exert influence. It's a way for them to project power without direct confrontation.
A bit like playing chess with someone else's pieces.
Exactly. But imagine those proxies armed with the knowledge that they have a nuclear-armed patron backing them up.
Oh, wow.
It's a recipe for even greater instability, with these groups potentially emboldened to take even bigger risks.
That's a terrifying thought. Especially when you consider the already fragile stability in places like Lebanon and Gaza.
And it's not just about emboldening their allies. A nuclear Iran might feel empowered to make bolder moves in existing territorial disputes. Remember those 3 islands they've been claiming from the UAE for decades?
Those have been a sticking point for a while now.
Exactly. A nuclear Iran might be more likely to use those islands as a bargaining chip. Or even resort to military force to assert their claims. And that's just one example. It raises concerns about international borders, maritime rights. The list goes on.
So we're looking at a potential domino effect on multiple fronts.
Exactly.
With so many potential flashpoints. Is there any hope for diplomacy? Or is this just an unstoppable train wreck?
It's certainly a complex situation, but I wouldn't say it's hopeless. It might seem like we're on a one-way track to conflict, but there's always room for diplomacy. Remember the Iran nuclear deal? It wasn't perfect, but it showed that even the most entrenched adversaries can find common ground.
That's true. It did eventually fall apart.
But
it was a pretty remarkable achievement while it lasted.
Exactly. And the fact that it happened at all shows that dialogue, however difficult, isn't impossible. And with the stakes higher than ever, the threat of a nuclear arms race looming large, there might be a renewed urgency from all sides to find a diplomatic solution.
That's assuming everyone's willing to come to the table in good faith. Which, let's face it, hasn't always been the case.
You're right. It's a tall order. But the alternative, a nuclear-armed Middle East with all its unpredictable consequences, is simply too dangerous to contemplate. We can't afford to give up on diplomacy, however difficult it may seem.
A glimmer of hope in a sea of uncertainty. But even if diplomacy wins the day, even if we manage to de-escalate the situation, Iran possessing nuclear weapons changes everything, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It fundamentally alters the balance of power, both regionally and globally. And it brings us to a concept you'll find fascinating, I think, called the stability-instability paradox.
Okay, that sounds like something out of a political science textbook. Can you break it down for me?
It's simpler than it sounds. The basic idea is this. While the threat of nuclear war might deter large-scale conflicts between, say, Iran and Israel, it could actually increase the likelihood of smaller, more frequent skirmishes.
So it's like having a really big, scary dog. Burglars might think twice about breaking into your house. But they might be more likely to vandalize your car just to mess with you.
That's a great analogy. Because both sides understand the catastrophic consequences of a nuclear war. They're less likely to risk it. But that doesn't mean they won't engage in more limited, calculated provocations, testing boundaries, pushing the limits.
Which, when you think about the current situation, the cyber attacks, the covert operations, the proxy conflicts, sounds an awful lot like business as usual.
Exactly. The stability-instability paradox suggests that a nuclear-armed Iran might not lead to a dramatic shift in behavior, but rather an intensification of existing patterns of conflict, just with even higher stakes. And of course, the potential for miscalculation is always there.
And the psychological impact on the region. It's got to weigh heavily on everyone's minds.
Absolutely, that the stakes have just been raised exponentially.
The constant fear and uncertainty, the erosion of trust, the normalization of militarization. These are all factors we can't ignore.
Wow.
It's a lot to unpack. And we're just scratching the surface here.
It paints a pretty sobering picture. But we also can't lose sight of the economic implications, right? I mean, we briefly touched on the oil situation. But there's got to be more to it than that. It's easy to get lost in the geopolitical weeds here.
It is.
But you're right. We can't ignore the economic reality of a nuclear-armed Iran. And you're not just talking about some short-term spike in gas prices, are you?
Not even close. We're talking about a fundamental shift in how the world perceives risk. Businesses crave stability. Predictable markets. But a nuclear Iran? That throws a wrench into the whole system.
I can see how that would make investors nervous.
But how does that actually play out? Give me the concrete consequences.
Think of it like this: money is a coward. It hates uncertainty. So when investors see a region teetering on the brink of conflict, with the potential for everything from oil shocks to full-blown war, they get skittish. And when they get skittish, they pull back. They hesitate. Projects get shelved. Capital flees to safer havens.
So it's not just about Iran itself. It's about how their actions send shockwaves through the global economy.
Precisely.
Wow.
And those ripples, they can manifest in countless ways. Reduced investment in emerging markets, trade routes drying up as companies get cold feet, even a dip in consumer spending as people around the world brace for a downturn.
Almost like this ripple effect creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more unstable things seem, the more unstable they become.
Exactly. And that's the thing about a scenario like this. It's almost impossible to predict the full scope of the fallout. But one thing's for sure. We live in an interconnected world.
We do.
And what happens in one corner has a nasty habit of impacting us all.
So listener name, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From the technicalities of uranium enrichment to a potential global recession.
That's right.
It's heavy stuff. What's the key takeaway here?
It's tempting to throw your hands up and say it's all too complex, too unpredictable. But I'd argue the opposite. Understanding these potential consequences, as daunting as they are, is the first step to avoiding them. Knowledge is power.
It is.
Even when it comes to something as complex as this.
So more information, not less. Deeper dives, not just skimming the headlines.
Exactly. And while we've unpacked a lot today, this isn't the end of the conversation. There are always more angles to consider.
More questions to ask.
For sure.
What about the potential for new diplomatic alliances, for example? Or how this might reshape global power dynamics in unexpected ways?
Listener name. You heard the expert.
That's right.
It's time to put on your analyst hat. We've given you the tools.
That's right.
Now it's up to you to dig deeper.
Exactly.
Until next time, keep asking the tough questions.